Hello everyone. In our last video, we implemented routing and set up the JSON server. Now, before diving into directly CRUD operations, I wish to cover the concept of NgRx effects. And then, as a practice exercise, we will apply the entire NgRx pattern, including the store and effects, to implement CRUD operations. Okay. So, why do we need NgRx effect? We need NgRx effects to handle external interactions such as API calls, keeping our application's core logic clean and organized. And in this section, we will integrate the JSON placeholder REST API and display its data using NgRx effect. So to work with NgRx effect, we first need to install the NgRx effect library, and which we have already done during environment setup using the command ng-add or npm install @ngrx/effects. And this command adds the ngrx effects package to our project's node module. If you navigate to the node module folder, here you will find the ngrx folder, and within that folder you can find the effects folder, which contains the ngrx effect library files. Okay, so we have set up the ngrx effects library. Now let's proceed step by step. And typically, our first step would be to create an action, but you can adjust your approach for convenience. So here, before creating an actions, we will define an interface that matches the API data structure. So I'll open the JSON placeholder URL to examine the API data. And we will use the to-dos API. So I'll go inside this endpoint. I'll copy these four properties, user ID, title, completed, and paste them into our interface file. And to organize our to-do related files, I'll create a new folder called to-dos under the state folder. And within that folder, I'll create an interface file named todos.store.ts. Now here, I'll export interface name I2do. And inside curly brackets, I'll paste all four properties. And quickly, I'll remove these double quotes. And instead of value, I'll add the data types. Username number, ID also number, title should be string, and completed should be boolean. Now next, I'll create three more files under the same to-do folder. The first is todos.actions.ts for defining actions. Next is todos.reducer.ts for handling state changes. And last, todos.effects.ts for managing side effects. Now let's start by creating actions. And we will need at least two actions. First is load to-dos to initialize the loading process. And second is load to-dos success to handle the successful retrieval of to-dos. And third action, load to-dos failure can be added to handle any potential errors. But for now, we will focus on implementing first two actions. And once you understand this, you can add the load to-dos failure action as well. Okay, so let's add the first action. Export const load to-dos equals to, we can create action by using the create action function. Create action, and inside round brackets, we need to mention the type. So this action is for to do. So I'll write to do inside square brackets, and then I'll write load to dos. Okay, so this is our first action. Now, second action is load to do success. So here also I'll write export const load to do success equals to create action, and again inside round brackets, I'll add the type to do load to do success, because this action is for to do success. And here I'll pass the props along with type. So props and then triangular bracket, and inside curly brackets we need to pass the store name. So I'll add store name to do's of type I to do. This is our interface name and then array symbol. Okay. So after triangular bracket, we need to add the round brackets as well. Just I'll format this structure. Okay. So we have created two actions. One is load to do's and another is load to do success. And inside this load to do success, we are passing the props. This to do's is a store name and this I to do is our interface name. Now let's create the reducer logic in todo.reducers.ts file to handle the load to do's and load to do success actions. And here we will define the initial state and update it accordingly based on actions. So first, let's define the shape of the state for the to do feature. Export interface I to do state. And it has a single property called to do's, which is an array of I to do's object. So here I'll add interface with array symbol. Next, we need to set the initial state for the to do feature. So here export const initial state of type this I to do state, and when the app starts, the to do's array is empty. So here I'll add to do's colon empty array. Okay. Now next, let's create a reducer function to manage the to do state. And we can create reducer using create reducer function. So here I'll write export const reducer name to do reducer equals to create reducer, and the create reducer function takes the initial state and a list of on handlers and returns a new state. So we have two handlers. So I'll add two on function. One is for load to do's action, state arrow symbol state, and another on function is for load to do success action, comma state. Here we need to pass the props, so to do's and then arrow symbol, and inside curly brackets we will use spread operator state comma to do's. Okay, so this state should be inside brackets and we need to import this on function from NgRx store. Okay, we have added first on function for load to do's action. When load to do's is dispatched, the state remains unchanged. And when load to do success is dispatched with a payload of to do's, the state is updated by replacing the existing to do's array with a new one. So here we define the state structure. Next, we set the initial state and created a reducer to handle two actions, load to do and load to do success. Now next, after setting up the interface, actions and reducers, we will create a new service to integrate the REST API using the HTTP client package. And to generate a service, I'll run the command ng generate service services slash to do and enter, which will create a new folder called services with the to do service files inside. Here you can see inside services, there are two files, todo.service.ts and todo.service.spec.ts. So I'll navigate to the todo.service.ts file, and now I'll quickly integrate the to-dos API. So first I'll copy this URL and store it in one variable. Private base URL equals to inside single quotes, I'll paste the REST API URL. And after that, I'll inject the HTTP client through constructor private HTTP colon HTTP client. And when working with HTTP client, make sure to add provide HTTP client to the providers array in app.config.ts file. So here I'll add provide HTTP client. Okay, don't forget this step. Now let me go back to the service file, and after this constructor, I'll create a method called getToDo's of type observable of type our interface name I2do. And then this method will return this dot http dot get of type I to do, and inside round brackets we'll pass the base URL, this dot base URL. Since this is the function, we need to add the round brackets. Okay. So now this get to do's method is holding all the data coming from this to do's REST API. And in order to display the API data on the web, we need to create an effect. So our next step is to create an effect. This effect will fetch the data and trigger an action to update the state. So now I'll go inside the todos.effect.ts file, and here we need to add the Angular @injectable decorator that allows a class to be injected with dependencies. So here I'll write export class to do effects, and this class is injectable and has two dependencies. One is actions and another is to do service. So first I'll write actions is an observable of NgRx actions injected via the actions type. Inject actions. Now second, we need to inject the to do service. So I'll inject this through constructor. Constructor private to do service of type to do service. Okay, so this to do service is a service for interacting with the to do API, and we have injected through the constructor. And here I noticed that if you register the action through the constructor, the actions might be undefined because the actions could be triggered before the constructor is called. So in such a case, it's better to inject or register the action using the inject function. Okay, so we have the class definition and dependencies. Now let's define the effect, and we will create an effect using the create effect function. So here I'll declare one variable called load to do's with dollar symbol. My caps lock was on. Load to do's equals to create effect function, and then we need to use the fat arrow syntax. And inside this, we will call the actions dot pipe, and then we will utilize the of type function from RxJS effect packages. And here we need to pass the action name as a parameter to filter the action. So our action name is load actions dot load to do's, and we need to import the to do actions. So here let me import star as to do actions from to do's dot action. Now after that, we will use the merge map RxJS operator. Remember, here we will use the pipe method, and then we will combine merge map and map RxJS operators. With merge map, we will trigger the API call. So here I'll use again the arrow function, and I'll call the get to do's method from to do service. So to do service dot get to do's, and then I'll use pipe method and use map operator to handle the response. So here inside map, I'll pass the to do's of type I to do square brackets and then arrow symbol, and then we will need to call the load to do success. I'll call this from to do actions dot load to do success, and here we need to pass the props, that is to do's. Okay, here we are getting an error. Observable unknown is not assignable to the type. I'll check the brackets. Okay, we need to import the map with merge map from RxJS library. Yeah, now we are getting the error on line number 19. Argument of type operator function I to do is not assignable to parameter of type I to do. Okay, let me check this get to do method. Okay, here I missed to add the square brackets. Since this is array, we need to add the square brackets. Yeah, now no errors. Okay, so this code creates an NgRx effect. First, it listens the load to do's action. Then it triggers an API call to load to do's. And on success, dispatches load to do success action with loaded to dos. Now, after creating an effect, we need to register the to do reducer and to do effects in the app.config.ps file. And we can register the reducer through provide store function. So here I'll add comma, and then we need to add the store name, that is to do's colon to do reducer. And next we can register the to do effect through provide effects function. So inside this round bracket, I'll add the square brackets and write to do effects. And here also we can register multiple effects in provide effects function by separating them with commas. And this provide effects function is automatically added when you install the NgRx Effects library. So to register the effect, we just need to add the effect name inside the provide effects array. That's it. Okay. So with this, we have completed this step by registering the to do reducer and to do effects. Now finally, we need to dispatch the action from the component using a selector. And earlier we have written the selector code directly in the component class file. But we can also create a separate file for selectors similar to actions, effects, and reducers. So this time, let's create a separate file for selector called todos.selector.ts to keep our code organized. And here, first we will create a feature selector with name select todos state using the create feature selector function, which will select the entire to-do state of type I to-do state from the global state. So inside this I to-do state, we can find only one property, that is I to-dos. So here I'll add I to-do and we need to export it. Export const select to-do state. Okay. Now next we will create another selector with name select to-do. Export const select to-dos equals to, now we will use the create selector function to create the selector. Create selector, which will utilize the select to-do state to extract and return the to-dos array from the to-do state. So here I'll add state arrow function and then state dot to-dos. So this select to-do state select the entire to-do state, and this select to-dos selects the to-dos array from the to-do state. Okay, so we have the separate selector file. Now we can dispatch the load to-dos action from any component. So now I'll create a new component called effects using command ngGenerate components slash effects. This command will add the component to the components folder. So here you can see the effects component under the components folder. Now to see the effect component on web, I'll add the routes in app.routes.ts file. So here I'll add one more route for effects. This route is for effect component. And also I'll update the Nava component template file by including one more link for this effect component. Here I'll add effects and the link name should be effects. Save the changes. And if I navigate to the browser, we can see the effect component. Okay. Now let's go inside the effect component ps file. And here we will dispatch the load to dos action. And to dispatch the action, we will need to inject the RxJS store into our component. Here I'll inject store through inject function. So store equals to inject, and inside bracket we need to write store from RxJS store. Now here I'll declare one property called to-dos data. This is observable properties, so I'll use the dollar symbol equals to. Here we need to use the select method to retrieve the to-dos data from the store. So this dot store dot select, and then we need to utilize the select to-dos selector. After that, we will use the ngOnInit lifecycle hook to dispatch the load to-dos action when the component initialized. So here we need to implement the onInit first, And then we need to define that ng on init lifecycle hook. Now here I'll write this dot store dot dispatch. Inside the round brackets, we need to pass the action, and the action name is load to dos. So this action triggers the effect that loads the to dos data from the API. So inside effect, you can see this load to dos action will call this API, and on success, it will dispatch the load to do success action with loaded to dos. Now next, to display the API data in the UI, we will use the async pipe to subscribe to this to dos data observable. So first I need to import the async pipe, and then inside effect.component.html file, I'll take one UL tag, and inside that I'll use the @for control flow syntax to iterate over the data. So here I'll copy this property to do data, and we will write here data of to do's data pipe async semicolon track dollar index, and then I'll take one li. Inside that li, I'll add the heading inside bold tag id colon inside double curly brackets. I'll write data.id, and same I'll do for title and completed data.title and data.completed. And with this, everything is set up. Now let's test the application. And when we navigate to the effects component in the browser, we can see the to-dos API data successfully rendered on the web page, fetched using NgRx Effects. You can see all the data. You can verify this ID equals to 200, and here also the last object with ID 200. Okay, so now we can display the same data in different component. Like we have created a CRUD component, we can simply copy paste the template and class file code of this effect component. So let me quickly do that. I'll copy this code from here, and let me open the CRUD component class file, and I'll paste it here. And don't forget to import the necessary imports. So I'll add all imports, all missing imports, and also I'll import the async pipe. Now I'll copy the HTML code from the effect component, and I'll paste the same code inside CRUD component template file. Save the changes, and when we navigate to the CRUD component, we can see the same to-dos API data. Okay, so we have rendered this to-dos API data inside CRUD component as well as effects component. And this demonstrates the power of NgRx in managing global state, allowing us to access and display the same data across multiple components in our application. So let's recap everything quickly. Let me close all files. And we started by creating an interface called iToDo, followed by actions for load to dos and load to do success. Then we created reducers to handle these actions. Next, we developed a service for API integration and created an effect that calls a service to fetch data when the to-dos action is dispatched. After that, we register the reducer and effects in app.config.ts file. We then created a selectors to retrieve to-dos data from the store. And finally, we dispatched the load to-dos action from effects and CRUD component and used the async pipe to display the data in the UI. So with this example, I assume that we have now gained a solid understanding of NgRx store and NgRx effects. So in the next video, we will review the all key concepts or principles of NgRx and put them into practice by implementing CRUD operations using a JSON server. So stay tuned by subscribing to FAD Learning, and show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing my videos with your friends. Thank you. Bye bye.